All right, welcome to a little, a novel little video we have. So the All Blacks are quite good at putting up their gym work. And so there's two videos we're going to look through here, and it's All Blacks in the gym. They're both called. So one of them is in Auckland, and the other one is just before their test match. And this was put out yesterday when we're recording it. So I think we're going to take a look through what they're doing, and we're going to analyze it and give a little bit of context and our opinions on what they're doing. Just as a preface, we like a lot of the stuff they're doing, so just to make that clear, we're not here
Yeah,
to rag on them. And
I
we could
think
have
this is going to
so
be one of the rare positive videos.
this could have gone. There could have been any number of rugby teams in a gym, which could have gone so terribly wrong. But we like a lot of this stuff they're doing. All right, so first up we have explosive squats, and honestly, this is probably the only thing where I'm kind of like, meh, why? What's the point? So these are like squats to above parallel. So they're doing these with an accelerometer on the bar, and so if they were using these for their working sets to measure velocity, then as you see, so if we've looked at any of the pay per view stuff we've done recently, and you'll kind of seen the like um kind of the velocity based measurement of the barbell speed, which I think is very useful, especially in teams when you're trying to keep power output. But in terms of trying to build explosive speed and stuff, I probably wouldn't be doing fast squats, is what they're trying to do there. What do you think, Fitz?
I think what they're probably doing is they're it's very likely they're using this as like a power production training tool. So they're probably using that. They're probably using the dynamometer to make sure they're within like that kind of 60 to 80% bracket, and they're putting out max power output on each one. So like the 1RM is probably like within that bracket. And to be honest, I'd say they're probably using the speed measurement here to make sure that like the speed stays high, and then once that speed drops down, they might just take them off that working set. Or they might just be measuring like if the speed is too low at the start of the session, they might have to alter the weight they're using.
Yeah,
So I'd say it's not like a kind of like, I think explosiveness is probably a bad term because it doesn't quite describe what they're trying to do, but I'd say it's probably like a max power output set is what they're looking to achieve.
yeah, and in like they could also be using that as like a measurement of fatigue or variability, on what's happening in the training session. So this might be the first thing, and if someone's looking really
Yeah,
slow or someone's particularly fast, and there's maybe a good idea what's going on. So let me
definitely. And like the other thing we don't really know here is like what they're doing in this block of training, because they could just have done a big strength
this is so
block.
like they're doing their test match at the moment. So like this is like right before a game.
Oh right, this is like very
Yeah.
recent.
Oh, this is yesterday or a few days ago.
Uh, yeah. So like obviously in this phase of training, you're not going to be hitting players with like large amounts of volume. You're probably keeping those like you're probably kind of maintaining some sort of top end strength. But mainly it will be that like fast, powerful movements I think they're looking to do. Squats look quite good. Like everybody, I think when people see these gym training videos, um, people like rag on things like they'll rag on squat depth, or they'll rag on like fucking bench reps or whatever. Uh, like there's very good reasons for people doing the things they do, or a lot of the time there will be. So I think we could probably address the squat depth thing first, Curve. Like there's
Let's
been
not.
a lot of
They get the
studies.
squats later in this video, so maybe
Oh, do they?
yeah. So let's leave it to that, because that exercise doesn't look to me like they're doing squats for the sake of squats in that particular thing, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. It's a power output exercise. Yeah,
So like we move on,
perfect.
and we have just some good old fashioned seal rows, which we fucking love. Usually with dumbbells, but obviously for
Oh
them,
my god, we love
they
them.
are, they're large lads. Like they are. If you see the New Zealand team up until last year, so what the team they brought to the World Cup was very light and kind of fast, and they were heavy focused on speed and skill. But as we know, the South Africans brought a thick little package to the World Cup, and they got not kind of manhandled, but the all South Africans were very powerful, and it looks like New Zealand are moving back that way. So like seal rows there, in terms of building mass in the upper body, is a phenomenal exercise, especially to limit a lot of body English.
Yeah, I think the other brilliant thing with seal rows and why for field sports athletes they're so good is because they just take the fatigue completely out of the back. So if that's like a weightlifter, a powerlifter, or a general strength training person, they can get a very similar stimulus with bent over rows, single arm bent over rows, like single arm supported. But when you have people who are like dealing with very high training volumes, getting them to, like as Garth was saying, limit the body English as much as possible by putting them on that ironing board, can be very, very useful.
So like next clip there, we see the lads are just joshing around as such. What I actually think is, I think that's quite good to see in terms of like, obviously, ultimately they're in a team environment here, like, so they're not individual athletes, like, so building some team cohesion, like having fun, while also being very productive in the gym, I think is very important too. Like, so it makes them, these are gym sessions that they probably look forward to doing. So, you know, some camaraderie definitely doesn't go astray, which is good to see, I think, in the team.
Yeah. I think they're like, there's definitely a bit of competition there as well. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
see, they're like, oh, what are you squatting, or what number did you hit there, or they're talking about why they might have missed the lift, you know.
And like they obviously have a good relationship
it's good
with
to
the
see,
S&C
like,
coach as well.
yeah,
Moving on into benching, like it's a solid lift for a rugby player. I think is like flat benching. Really,
yeah.
there's not a whole lot to
And
say
that's,
for that.
so I think a lot of rugby teams, and like with their S&C, you'll see things like floor press being brought in. You'll see things like bench to a block on their chest, and it's probably a good time to talk about that, right? So floor press obviously limits the range of motion, and like you don't have it coming the whole way down to the chest. There's a couple of reasons they use floor press instead of bench press. The first reason, and the most prominent reason in rugby, is that a lot of players' shoulders are fucked, or else they're just recovering from being fucked, or else they're on the way to being fucked, and in a few weeks they'll be fucked again, you know. So in terms of range of motion of a rugby player's shoulders, if you can get them to do full bench presses, it's absolutely brilliant. But a lot of the time it's just like, it's not that applicable. So I think to see like a large group of players doing full bench presses coming the whole way down to the chest speaks to the range of motion in a lot of their shoulders. Other reasons you'll hear thrown around for like the partial range of motion in the bench pressing is that like when people are handing off, so like defending movement in rugby, most of the time you're going from like a 90 degree to a 180 degree, and you're in the elbow, and you'll rarely be pushing them the whole way from the chest. So it is quite interesting to see them going to the full bench press here. Like I remember seeing videos of them doing banded full range of motion bench presses a few years ago. So yeah, it is just like if you're watching other videos like this and you see them going to like a block on the chest, or you see them doing a floor press, they're the kind of reasons, you know, that like it's not like when you go to the gym and train on your own that you can just everything is grand. Like these guys have a lot of other things going on in their training regimes.
So then we're moving on to the next thing, which I'm very fond of seeing here. Is your man is doing some very legitimate, I don't know who this particular player is, but he's doing, so he's, in the subtitles he's talking about doing 220 kilo back squats for triples, right? And he said he's going to do 230 for triple, but like he is below parallel, Adidas weightlifting shoes, and he seems to have knee sleeves rolled down. Like these are legitimate high bar squats. Like I think me and Fitz have kind of argued before, or not argued before, but disagreed before. Like so a lot of times you see rugby players is just doing box squats, and like there's caveats to both of those, and there's kind of pros and cons from doing both of those. And I think my kind of view is, obviously because these are professional athletes, it's very likely that they had some kind of quality S&C coach all the way coming up through the years, which is what allows them to get to this position where they can routinely do heavy high bar back squats without worry of, you know, fatiguing their legs too much, or way more importantly to them is not getting injured or producing any kind of issues, you know, especially on their ACL or something, their meniscus or something like that, which are particularly susceptible to. But in these, like the quality of this high bar back squat to me looks like someone has been doing it for a long time, and you can't get to 220 kilo for triples or 230 triples without having a very, very solid base of high bar squats, you know, a very solid base of coaching someone for at least a couple of years, you know.
Yeah, like, so it is something we've kind of thrown over and back on a good bit before in the past, Gareth, right? Of the above parallel squat or box squatting for rugby players. Like the reasoning behind it, or why it's very popular at the moment, is there's been some studies done on it in Leinster, and that's why like a lot of clubs will go to the squat to parallel or squatting above parallel, and they're looking at basically there's trade-offs, right? So the trade-off is you can get somebody very, very, very strong in that kind of above parallel squat. You can get them there faster than you can in a full range of motion squat. They may not have as much fatigue carrying through, but realistically they probably will, because the relative load will be higher. But what they're looking at and why it's become so popular is because of issues with rugby players and ACL tears and meniscus tears. So it's not that squatting to depth increases their risk, or squatting to full depth increases risk of ACL tears or increases risk of meniscus damage, or that the fatigue they build up through that kind of training has anything to do with the knee injuries. That's not what it is. It's more that the squatting above parallel, people just get a lot stronger at it, and their relative max becomes so much higher with that kind of squat that they then have that kind of protective mechanism in place when they're on the field. So like I think it's like the trade-off of, okay, do we get somebody a 240 squat that's just above parallel, or do we get them to 205 kilos full range of motion? And then is it more important to have a 240 squat single that's just above parallel if somebody hits them in from the side of the knee? Like, is it more important that they have a 240 squat or a 205 squat? Yeah, I think that's some of the background around it. I think it was Giles Warrington was involved in that study in Leinster, and you do see like a lot of rugby S&C and a lot of S&C for athletics and everything else going to parallel or going to just above parallel. But a lot of the guys here have very, very legit squats.
Yeah,
their squats that we good in a weightlifting club.
Yeah, like it really comes down to, I suppose, is the individual really is the very important thing here. And, you know, if you have an individual who's vastly unable to squat, you know, 1.5 times body weight without good form, like, are you really going to push them to do a good high bar squat? But obviously, in this particular episode we're looking at here, like, this individual doing those squats has extreme justification looking at the quality of them and the movement. And he's obviously aware, like he said, he was going to go to 230, but he's obviously very aware of what his loading are and his limits are, and he's a conscious athlete. And I think, you know, if you have an individual who's well able to do high bar squats and is capable of loading them appropriately, then I think it's definitely something worth going for.
Absolutely. And I think like there's certain positions where like having full range of motion in the squat and having somebody who's incredibly well conditioned in all ranges of motion, like if you're a prop forward or playing anywhere in the tight five, your ability to go into that small bit extra flexion in the knee and small bit of extra flexion in the hip could be the difference between a scrum not collapsing and a scrum collapsing. You know, like if you're able to take load going backwards in a scrum, which is obviously not ideal, but if you're able to be stable going backwards when that knee is coming up higher and higher into your chest, it's going to be a lot better for you.
So next little clip here, I have very fond of this exercise, and a lot of my athletes get it, and we'd give it to a lot of ours, is single leg RDLs with a little bit of weight. Like, you can see a little bit of weight there that looks like 12, 15 kilo kettlebell, probably not a lot more, and considering the size of the athlete, like for lower back stability and like midline kind of coordination for a rugby player in a compromised position like that, if he's going into any kind of encounter, his ability to maintain stable, not only for withstanding that kind of collision impact, but also for protecting himself, is very important. And like, this is one of those kind of big bang for their buck. Like, loading is minimal, fatigue is minimal, but the quality of movement it teaches you, you know, like the carryover he would get to actual playing rugby would be very important. And like, obviously he's a big lad, like, so he's not a forward running like, he's definitely taking some hits. Like,
it's funny when you see the exercise selection here. Everything we've seen so far is in the off season.
I know, yeah. It's, you know, I like a lot of that stuff. So again, we just seen some lads doing steel rows in the background. We can see a lad doing normal squats with the accelerometer or the velocity meter on the bar.
Yeah.
Then we're just seeing some chin ups. Like again, you can't go wrong. Like the overarching message from this whole video is we have the best rugby team in the world. And you know what? They're not doing complex movements. Like they're not doing stupid shit in the gym that we see that's so popular at the moment, and like people associate complexity with effectiveness, and they're not doing like a jump to a Bosa ball, then like a lateral jump, and then like slamming a fucking hammer into a giant tire, and then running over and doing. Oh, it just drives me fucking crazy. People love it, and it's such a rise of this stuff where they're doing like quarter squats to parallel, holding a trap bar, like, then straight into like a squat jump, like lateral lunges in the air. You know, you're just like, fuck, like that's not what, like, these.
Joe, who I think is the worst for that is those like tactical fitness or combat fitness. Joe, like they look like doing like a jump sideways off a box and then landing on one leg and then sprinting forward. Like they look like they're trying to shake sand out of their vagina.
Okay, so again, the rest of this episode, just we'll do the other one because there's a lot of different movements in the other video and it's worth watching. So the rest of this,
probably like just to touch on in that one, Garth, is the pull-ups, like, you know, because there's something interesting you see there. There's like a neutral grip pull-up, there's a standard grip pull-up, and I think there might even be guys doing chin-ups. Yeah, and it's like people will argue until the cows come home about like chin-up variations and what's better and what's more important, and maybe you should be like titrating in other pull-up variations, and like this is what's important now in this phase of training. Like these are some of the best athletes in the world, and it appears as though they just have pull-ups. Like it might be that they're all being told to do specific ones, but it is like, it seems to be a lot more simple than that. Yeah. Like and as well, they're benching like fucking 160 for reps there. Yeah. That's 150 and that's 160 on that bar. And like you can see here, the S&C coach, Gilly, what his name is, he's explaining to them why they're doing stuff and what's happening. And like that is so important for that individual athlete to know why he's doing something. So he's going to put that effort in because he's like, oh, this will help my rugby. Because this is his living, you know, like ultimately he's a pro athlete, and if of all teams in the world, nobody changes the roster like All Blacks, like from one season to the next. Was it they from World Cups? No, so from when Ireland beat the All Blacks in 2018 on November, was it half the team was different by the time they got to the World Cup? Like that is something fucking like insane. If anyone watching rugby will know that's something. A crazy turnover. And then we see. I'm glad you got that fact in, Gerf, about us beating them. And then we see what looks to be peel-off presses with a cable, which you know we love again. It's kind of annoying because, you know, ragging on would be more popular, and then the last little thing from this video I think is important. You can just see a little, you can hear the comments in the video and see the subtitles. He said if you're finished, get out of the gym. So don't waste time. Don't spend extra energy. You've got a match soon. Just get the fuck out of the gym. Yeah. So we'll move on to the second video because I think it's worthwhile looking at, because there's it's a lot of different movements. So this is about a month ago. So this is All Blacks gym session in Auckland. So just some, what I would assume was a warm up on an air bike. I can cut some of those in if we don't see anything. Yeah, like I think you do see like air bikes being used a good bit. You see spinning bikes being used a good bit in their training videos. So like it is clear that they're doing, like, even if they're just doing resistance training in a session, they are doing a lot of like the kind of work capacity stuff during their warm-ups, getting a higher heart rate, getting a higher core body temperature, which is all things that everybody should be doing. And I think it's things as like gym enthusiasts or whoever might be watching this, you should be taking note of that. Like the warm-ups you did for PE class where you went and ran 5 laps and then did some stretching and some movement still applies even though you're just in the gym. So we have a little clip here of one of the athletes doing kind of single leg squats or balances on a Bosu ball, and obviously that got a lot of ragging over the last few years because it's dumb. But if you're looking for stability training or whatever, it's I think it's almost a waste of time. However, if you're looking for someone who's rehabbing an ACL injury,
I think they've done a bit of work on running on sand and stuff, and I think something similar to a Bosu ball, and apparently it's been quite effective in terms of like rehabilitating a knee. And there's a huge likelihood that this is what this player is doing, because no one else in the gym seems to be doing it. And like there's a distinct possibility, and I give him the benefit of the doubt that he's doing that because he's trying to rehab a knee injury.
Yeah, or possibly prehab and stop something that might be just occurring now. Yeah,
Weighted
the
chin-ups.
stability stuff divides people, because you have people who love like all the balls to ball stuff, all the instability training, but like then you have the other side who are staunch in the face of like strength and stability over instability in your training. But I'd say it's very likely when you see that player on his own out to the side that he's, like Asgarth was saying, working on his own towards something else.
Then just good old fashioned weighted chin ups, a phenomenal exercise for anyone trying to take any kind of hits. I think is such a good one for bracing.
Yeah.
Again, high bar back squats. He's like depth, solid depth. Again, like I know people watching this would be, or some of our usual clientele would be like, he's not going that low. But again, to me, it looks that's as low as he can reasonably get with using any kind of weight that will have a positive impact.
And look, it's so important to note that these guys aren't squatting to get better at squatting. They're squatting to elicit a physiological effect that makes them better at doing their job. That is definitely like the biggest thing people need to take away from like these kind of videos is that, look, if these guys didn't need to be in the gym, they'd be on the field playing rugby, or they'd be watching tape, or they'd be doing whatever, like there's a huge amount of other stuff they have to do. They are just in the gym to get a physiological response, to kick their body in a certain direction of adaptation, and then they'll get out of the gym again. Like some of them might enjoy lifting weights or whatever, but nobody's here for the good of their health.
No. So we got some plyometrics there. We got your man, the rising star Caleb Clark. He's doing some single leg hops, and then we see the lads doing some little bit of weighted jumps. So this, I don't really think it matters, to be honest, but if we're really nitpicking, weighted jumps are something you don't want to be doing as a field athlete, especially when they're not lifting against any weight realistically. Like maximum, we've talked about this more and we'll be going to in more depth later in our series, but like maximum power output is done with body weight, and so when you're doing plyometric movements or whatever, you want to be doing them unweighted to produce the most amount of power, which they would be looking for. Honestly though, I don't really think it matters a whole lot, considering like the weight looks like a 2 or 3 kilo medicine ball. I don't think it's particularly impactful.
I think what you could be seeing the weight being used there for is to take out the counter movement of the hands.
Maybe, yeah.
Because like if you're a line out jumper or whatever, and you have your hands here, you're not going to be swinging your hands down. And it's the same if you're looking to like for a change of direction going into a tackle, and you have the ball in the hands like that. Just having a really light ball in the hand can be very useful there. I don't think it's like the weighted vest scenario.
Yeah.
Because like if you want to jump higher, you jump higher. You don't jump lower with more weight on you. I think just on the box jump thing, the last thing there I'd say is that like what people need to notice is they're landing high on the box. So they have small bend in the knee, some flexion at the hip, but they're not doing the fucking box jump where they land in a squat position and their center of mass has moved 4 centimeters.
Yeah.
So they're jumping to get as high onto the box as possible. They're landing with legs almost straight. They've moved their center of mass the maximum distance they can. And then like obviously they have lower boxes for doing like single leg jumps. They're doing some drop jumps off a small drop height. Then the last thing is like the drop height is something people should be noting if they're bringing this into their training, that the drop heights are never big. You know, like you're not a pole vaulter or a max fucking
6 inches there, like
like you want a small drop to elicit a small response, and that's it.
So the next thing in this video that I think is very, very interesting is they are drilling passing. So we've AA Ron Smith and
Aaron
Smith and looks to be Mr. Barrett. So I think like they seem to be drilling these for reps, which I think is very interesting. Obviously, this is crucially important,
Yeah,
is passing the ball, and they seem to be doing this like they're visibly sweating. So this is like I think drilling skills. I think is very interesting in the gym, and they're just half kneeling or kneeling position. But I think this is quite interesting, like that they're, sometimes we see people try to replicate their sport in the gym, and I think this is so dumb. But this not in this scenario here. I think they're not trying to replicate the sport in the gym. They're just literally practicing some skills.
yeah. And when you have skill practice like this with certain constraints involved, so like they have the constraint of they're on two knees, then they're on one knee, but the knee is in the way of the body, so they don't have the same like trunk rotation, or they don't have the same ability to like manipulate their posture as they're passing the ball. So they're drilling very specific things with their skill movements, which is definitely something that like as aspiring rugby players or soccer players or whatever it might be, if you're doing these skill specific training pieces, like you might do them at the end of a session to practice under fatigue or whatever that might be, having some sort of movement constraint in there can actually be quite useful once you've once you've acquired like the requisite amount of skill you need to perform the skill well on its own.
So overhead pressing for like we had mentioned previously with the bench press is kind of, if you can do it pain free, it has its uses. But as bang for a buck, it may not be the like general mass builder. It's probably what it's more useful for, rather than kind of like direct skill transfer to rugby, I think.
Yeah, I think like it definitely has its place, but it is the same thing like with shoulders and rugby players. Full range of motion, strict overhead presses don't happen a lot. You don't seem to see a lot of them doing it there. To be honest, I think it could be like a good thing to promote range of motion in the shoulders. Like they don't seem to be going very heavy with it. And definitely if they're coupling that in a superset with something like a pull up or something, just to get some length back into the lats after really, really stimulating them, I think that could be what you're seeing there.
Now, here's something I think people have been waiting for a while: is power cleans from the floor. To be honest, so my view most of the time is, why bother? But I think, to be honest, a lot of athletes just like doing them. I think they just like doing it. It's an
Yeah,
enjoyable exercise. It feels athletic, especially in your gym. You're moving some weight. Like in general, this technique is fine. To be honest, maybe a little bit wide, but not particularly. It's not particularly disgusting. The weight is 105 by the looks of thing, 110 kilos. Uh, do I think it's having any positive impact?
yeah.
Maybe not. I'm usually kind of on the air in the kind of what.
It probably has some power
What's
production
that?
impact. It probably does have some positive power production impact, because it is within that bracket of like where the weight should be. They're moving it as fast as they can, uh, and it's like it's a lot faster than what their deadlift will be. They might get more stimulus from like a clean pull or a clean pull from blocks or something. But when you look at like when these games are happening like in test series, so when they're really, really in season, I think even with your power production work, like they can't be doing the clean high pulls from blocks or something that you might get more stimulus from. So I think to a certain extent they can just get like that probably is giving them a relatively good training stimulus. Like the things people are going to look for there is like the early arm bend in the clean. They're going to look for their feet catching it too wide. And in all honesty, like it for this cohort of individuals, it probably doesn't matter usually.
Like my view on that is kind of, how much time do they have in the gym? How much time do they have to learn new skills in the gym? How much time will they have to learn this skill and then get it to a weight that has some positive impact? And again, it really comes down to the individual
Yeah.
doing the lifts and the reps.
Oh, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed that, let us know. If you want to see us analyze any other athletes in the gym, any other teams, whatever they're doing, just let us know in the comments and we'll get to it. If you want to get that off-season athlete program that we're talking about at the start of the video, just head over to seekstrength.com and it's all yours. Thanks for watching, guys.